Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Voices from the Desert. Normally, that's where Murray would come in with the coyote howl. So, that's kind of how we'd start things. But for those of you that are listening versus watching, you're going to go, I didn't hear Murray here. What's going on? Is this just Josh? You can hear some maybe restless voices in the background a little bit. And so anyway, I've got a replacement Murray for this. We've got Murray number 2. His name's not Murray, it's Rob. He's a very good friend, a longtime friend. I've known Rob since meeting him at Stonehenge in 2008. So that was our introduction to each other 16 years ago. And we became friends, and we've been friends ever since. And Murray couldn't be here today, so I asked Rob to fill in for Murray as my co-host. And Rob and I was my wife and I, everybody, you guys know, we drove across the country. We moved from Eastern Canada to Western Canada, and we happened to stay with Rob and Katie, some very good friends, in Coeur d'Alene on the drive across. And we had a dinner with the group of friends that are there that we've known for many years, been involved with different ministry initiatives, outreaches to crazy places like Burning Man that we'll be talking about today a little bit. And one of Rob's friends, a mutual friend named Barb, was mentioning this guy that she had met through Burning Man. She had been part of the team. Actually, I was going back through, his name's Will Spencer. He's right there. He's here. Will, I was going back through your Facebook posts and looking at some of the old ones and went, oh, there's a picture of Burning Man with you standing there with Barb and talking about the term like 2017 or 2018 or something. And it's helpful that I don't think we were friends on Facebook, so there's only a few Facebook posts that I could actually look at, so it was easy to scroll back far. And so there it was Barb with Will right there. And Barb was telling me about this awesome guy who he started a podcast. He'd had this long circuitous journey through drug addiction, and I think you started off as a technology guy, right? And was that in the Silicon Valley or something like that? You were working for tech companies and end up getting into drugs, or very straight-laced, but get into drugs, and then end up at Burning Man exploring New Age and all this kind of stuff, and meet the team, these wild kind of these Christians that go to Burning Man to minister and prophesy over people at Burning Man, and meet them there. And then 5 years later, you give your life to Jesus. You start a podcast, and your podcast, you talk about all kinds of crazy, not crazy, but the variety of topics of politics, economics, what it means to be. And you started off, what does it mean to be a man? The Renaissance of men was one of your real passions there, and so I'm just meeting Will. We had a conversation the other day, and I thought, hey, that'd be awesome to be able to talk with Will about this whole journey and where he's at. So, Will, it's great to have you on the podcast. Great to have you on Voices from the Desert. You're kind of like, I think you might be a poster child for a voice from the desert. So, that really seems apropos. So, Will, why don't you tell us just a little bit about what you're doing now, and the Will Spencer podcast, and what you're doing now. So, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rob. It's good to see you. I'm sure we'll get into the story of how Rob and I met, but Rob, it's coming up on 10 years. 10 years, actually. It'll be 10 years in August. So, which is pretty incredible. So I host the Will Spencer podcast. Again, it was formerly the Renaissance of Men. On the Will Spencer podcast, I host conversations with authors, leaders, and influencers who sort of help us understand the way the world is changing today. So it's a Christian podcast, a Christian worldview podcast. Not everyone that I interview is Christian, but most of the people are. And I sort of help people figure out, well, what are some of the factors that have made the world the way it is today? Where are things going, and how can we take things in a more Christian direction? So that's the Will Spencer podcast. You can go to Linktree/Will Spencer, and you can find all of that. I'm also a men's counselor by trade, and I'm starting that business up again very soon, which I'm excited, very excited to do.
Yeah, that is awesome. I didn't know that. Well, we'll make sure when the website and everything's up there, we'll make sure we'll update the podcast description and point people that way. That's such a needed thing. So, and then I kind of be remiss if I didn't mention Rob a little bit more than just Murray number 2. So for those of you that are listening, Rob and I, like I said, we met at Stonehenge in 2008 when he was involved with a team of Christian weirdos that thought a great thing to do would be to go to the Summer Solstice Festival in Stonehenge to do an outreach. And they invited a couple of us that were interning with a ministry we were all connected with called Streams Ministries. And so we showed up to Stonehenge not really knowing what to expect. And I think they call that bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And we walked into quite the experience there. We met some druids and saw a lot of drunk people. So, yeah, that was pretty much it. So Rob has been involved with Streams Ministries for a long time, and teaching courses and helping people hear the voice of God and this kind of stuff. But Rob, and actually a woodworker by trade, and actually quite a well accomplished one in his years. So Rob, what do you do today?
What do I do today? It's jack of all trades, master of none is something I've always embraced rather proudly. So, we're still pursuing post Burning Man, how to reach the culture, and we spent a dozen years working in a sympathetic coffee cafe with the street people, new age people, college students, whatnot. And we still are working on ideas. How can we get out there and how can we connect with the culture? And I don't know. Yesterday, I just restarted a writers group that I let dormant for a few months. And I'm pretty passionate about poetry and prose being part of our prophetic language, part of our a kind of a narrative that's popular in the culture. But we have a lot to say as believers in the way we say it and the power that emanates from our words.
That's right.
So last night went swimmingly well. It was really good. There's just a variety. I think Katie and I do a lot of counseling as well, all over the board, and we're also working with Barb on Arthur Burke redemptive gifts and trying to make it more understandable on a church level. So I'm kind of working with the women. They seem to be the spiritual ones that want to push. And so I'm the token guy in there, really just supporting Barb, and Katie and I are, but Katie's my wife, getting behind Barb and this idea of learning your design is very important. It's hot on God's list that you know your design and operate out of that, and you don't get all sidetracked in directions you shouldn't be. Plus, you learn how to honor the design in others, and you think it's a key for the future. Right. I know you are Christians by the love you emanate, but if we don't know how to get along with each other or read one another spiritually, they're working hard on that on the other side, so to speak. We, on the other hand, just sort of say, well, you're saved, just go to a church. And I think there's a lot more to it than that,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's sort of a short version. Actually, the only thing I've done with woodworking is the last 2 months I've been passionately making a writer's desk for myself. That's been a dream for maybe 12, 15 years. And
there you go.
And, so I sort of laid that to rest, but I got a shop full of tools that talk to me all the time when I go in there. So it's satisfied some of that lately.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Yeah. So pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you here, Rob.
Yeah. We're old friends now.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys go back at least 10 years, and
yeah,
I don't know, maybe 15 for you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2008. So, Will, I'm curious, just when you mentioned that your podcast you started the podcast as Renaissance of Men, and now it's the Will Spencer podcast. And so
right.
what was the catalyst, or what was the moment where you're looking at the term Renaissance of Men? Like, that's obviously a thing that's near and dear to you then, is men recapturing who men are. I'm assuming, based on the name of the podcast anyway, what it used to be.
There's a reason why I changed it, though.
Sure. Well, I think the scope of interest is much more than simply that. But what was what was that thing that was 2020? You go, I'm gonna start a podcast about helping men see their way in the world. What was that about?
Mm-hmm. So the story actually begins in 2001. So I took a class on Carl Jung,
right,
in my senior year in college, and the class was talking about the Lord of the Rings movies were about to come out, and the professor was talking about how, again, it's Jungian psychology, about how the different characters in the Fellowship of the Ring represent different aspects of masculinity and manhood.
sure.
And so I listened to that, and I thought that was very interesting, because the only picture of manhood that I'd ever been given was, pizza and football and beer. That was the fraternity boy, the frat boy was kind of, and the football player. That was the only valid version of masculinity that I think I had ever seen presented to me by culture. And so here they're talking about the Lord of the Rings as another way to understand what it means to be a man. And I was like, this was very compelling to me, because here's a completely different picture of different versions of masculinity that I can bring forward in myself.
Right.
And so it helped me realize that, well, maybe I'm not broken because I'm not that. Because I thought, well, I've never been the frat boy. That's never been me. So there must be something broken about me as a man. And I really believe that. But so with this class, it showed me there's actually more to it than that. And I thought that was very interesting. And so you take that and you run it forward. That sort of started the wheels turning in my mind for 12 or 13 years. And then you run it forward to an organization called the Mankind Project in 2013, which based on Jungian psychology, did a 48-hour men's initiation retreat. And so I go on this retreat in 2013, and here are, I think there are probably 50 or 60 guys who are attending the retreat, and 50 or 60 staff members who are leading it, who have all been through it already. And you have men from all walks of life, all ages, from like 18 to 70, that are all struggling with this question: what does it mean to be a man? And this was shocking to me. And the guys who were leading the retreat, they weren't professional therapists. They were just everyday guys who worked in every industry you can think of. And so I realized that I'm not the only one who's been struggling with this question. And this organization had initiated, quote unquote, something like 60,000 men around the world.
Wow.
And had been going for 20 years. I was like, what is going on? And so carrying some of that information, I started attending men's groups. So in a therapist's office, so he would facilitate a circle of men. We'd just get together and talk about our lives. We weren't friends. We were friendly, but we weren't friends. So we would have that sort of anonymity. And then I went to travel, which I'm sure we'll get to later. And in 2018, I discovered something called the Manosphere. So the Manosphere was an online sort of globalized men's community of men figuring out other aspects of what it means to be a man. So more outward focused stuff like physical fitness and personal finance and wealth building and stuff like that. And so I was looking at what I had learned from the world of Jungian psychology in this retreat, called the Mythopoetic Men's Movement. It was what it was called. And so here you have a group of men that are talking about men's inner lives, guilt and shame and quote unquote trauma and personal histories and stuff like that, family of origin stuff. And then you have this other group of men that are talking about men's outer lives, which is like, making money, getting fit, stuff like that. And so, but both of these two groups didn't seem to know about each other. And I found that to be really odd, because I had navigated through both worlds. It's like, how can there be all these men around the world that are talking about what it means to be a man, and they don't seem to know each other? So I started the podcast in 2020, because I thought I had been blessed to learn so much from a lot of these men at the time. I was like, well, I need to talk to all of these influencers so they all know about each other. And so they can see that there's something much larger than all of them going on. And so the way that I described it at the time is you have a big circle of men that are standing facing away from each other. And I'm like in the helicopter over it, like, hey guys, turn around. And so they can all turn around and look like, oh, there's something so much bigger going on. So that was the purpose of the podcast originally.
Right. Oh, that's really good. Yeah. I love that. The picture of in my group of guys that I hang out with here in BC and Canada, one of the questions we pose is which member of the fellowship are you? And right. So that is one of the de facto things that we talk through. And the guy who kind of we navigate following he's a spiritual father to many of us. He sees himself as Aragorn, and he's the in the movies anyway, the reluctant king, and willing to go, but he's reluctant to pick up the sword. So anyway, we're talking about this stuff all the time, and I love that this different picture of what it means to be a man. So I had seen that was the original name of the podcast, so it definitely intrigued me. Yeah. So going back, the journey, into drugs, New Age, Burning Man, all of that. You weren't raised in a Christian home. What's your background? What's the story of origin there for you?
My family is all liberal, atheist, secular Jews.
Okay.
So my mom and my dad both were. My mom passed away in 2006.
Okay.
She grew up Jewish. Both of her parents were. Both of my dad's parents were. My whole family is Jewish, but they don't have any real belief in God. We would do, all the religious rituals, Passover and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I was bar mitzvahed, and we would go to high holiday services, Rosh Hashanah, every year, but it never had any theological grounding. We never really talked about God all that much, or at all, really. It was, we do these things because we're Jewish and this is what Jewish people do, but there wasn't really much conversation about God.
Right. So those are not a component of faith or anything.
Yeah.
In that case. So what was the intriguing part of, what was the part of you that when I want to be involved in something, quote unquote spiritual, from Jungian psychology to New Age and Burning Man? What, if you have no background, that's really, some of us raised in church or whatever, we have some kind of religious affinity in our family of origin, but if that's not there, what was the moment that said, I think I want to explore something deeper?
I think it was always just part of me. Like when I was a little kid and all the other boys and girls were reading, I don't know, the Hardy Boys or whatever, I was always the kid reading the Bigfoot and UFOs and Loch Ness Monster books from the library. Yeah. And then when I was 12 and I was getting ready for my bar mitzvah, my Torah portion was the 10 Commandments. And so that wasn't something that I chose. It was just providentially assigned. And so I remember sitting with the rabbi learning about my Torah portion, just, so what are the appointed times? And I remember he said, the second 5 commandments are there so you don't violate the first 5 commandments, something like that. And I remember sitting in his office and being like, that's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought there was that internal logic to it. And so I guess I just always had a sort of spiritual curiosity. I remember I went to a Jesuit high school because it was the best high school in town, and I enjoyed my religious studies classes. And then I went to college in the Bay Area in the late 90s as the rave scene was exploding. Eastern mysticism that was sort of left over from the 1960s really combined with a lot of institutional support and the New Age, and just exploded culturally. And I found my way into that world and found more things of spiritual interest to be involved in than were perhaps good for me.
Right. Could you go back in that time when you were 12? Can you think, was there a time where you were on some level aware that well, there's a hunger for some of maybe the mysterious? Was there a moment where you were aware obviously pre 2020, but even pre rave scene and everything, that there's something bigger than you? You're aware of a presence or aware of something?
That's a really good question. I think I can't really identify a moment in my life where I first had that conscious thought. I think perhaps it was always just a part of me that came out over time. Like I can't ever say that there was a moment where I suddenly realized that there's a God or something bigger than me. I think I just always had that intuitive knowledge that there were mysteries beyond my understanding, and I
Sure.
went looking for them. I'd have to think about that one more, but I just off the top of my head, I can't really think of any particular moment where I went from being a total, I don't want to say atheist, a non-theist or whatever, to suddenly believing in something higher. I think on some level I've probably just always taken it for granted somehow that there is a higher power, divine mystery, whatever language you want to use.
Something innate that's always
Yeah.
been there. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's funny because I've gotten into conflict with family members over that, because I think I've always been, in a sense, we'll say spiritually minded, and not all of my family members are, and not everyone is. And so I've sort of existed with this, I don't know, innate understanding in a way that I guess others haven't had. So that's unusual for me, but I've learned to navigate it, I guess.
Right. So getting into the rave scene in the 90s into the 2000s as Eastern mysticism and New Age and New Thought is just exploding.
Yeah.
What was that like? And was it, as a spiritually hungry person, what was it like? Like a lot of people that are going to be listening, maybe raised in church, maybe they were disaffected um, with the religious system, and they find answers in a different denomination or a different theological approach, whatever, right? But your journey is way different than that in that sense, right? It's almost the complete opposite. But you're disaffected with the answers that you were getting in any kind of religious sense in your upbringing, and you're going, I'm looking for an answer of some kind. So what was that like getting into, I can't, I'm trying to picture a the kind of substance that you would be given by New Age rave scene to answer a deeper spiritual need. Like that's what I'm trying to picture.
Yeah. I don't know that I would ever say I was disaffected with the answers that I was given. I think it was just just a natural curiosity that led me. Like, so again, I grew up in a Jewish family, nominally Jewish, religious, ritualistic, but, not talking about God. I went to a Catholic Jesuit high school, which I don't recall ever hearing the gospel preached. I think they just kind of take it for granted. And then I went to college, and started reading Carl Sagan, who's sort of a skeptic mystic, right? And so then this is, three steps along the road of my own curiosity. And then I found my way into the rave scene. And the thing with the rave scene is that there's a couple big hooks. One is that it's deeply experiential. So you take very powerful psychoactive drugs, whether it be acid or mushrooms or ecstasy, the most popular ones, which have a real visceral component. You have very loud thumping sound, which you can actually feel in your body. You have feelings of community and feelings of belonging, and you have all this iconic, imagery, right, of essentially Eastern mysticism, New Age kind of stuff. So it's sort of designed not to appeal to your rational mind. It's supposed to bypass and switch off the rational mind and just feel. And so one of the biggest hooks of the world at the time was feeling a sense of community and belonging. Because I think that one of the big appeals of the rave scene was a sense of chosen family, people who grow up in broken homes, whether they're the children of divorce or various abusive or abdicating situations. And so they find amongst themselves, and they're usually in their 20s, maybe late teens, a sense of family and belonging that they didn't have when they grew up. So it's sort of, you can think of it as sort of like catechizing kids through sensory input, sensory overload, in this alternative set of values. And I think that was probably some of the hook for me. But of course, there is also presenting all these different competing spiritual systems that I just had an innate curiosity about. Just like, oh, how does this work? Right. But that grew over time.
Right. And it's using the language of catechizing is kind of funny because, in a way, do you think back to the history of the Catholic Church, pre-Reformation, and into the iconoclastic controversy in the 9th and 10th centuries, going, we need to represent God through art form that draws people into a place of encounter, or at least mystical contemplation,
Right.
and so the whole, in a way, the cathedral is developed, the iconography of the East and the West, although the West rejected iconography not in the same way that the East did, but the artistic representation, a lot of it developed to, in a sense, it wasn't so much to bypass the rational mind as it was because the rational mind was underdeveloped. Like, people didn't have an actual copy of the Bible to read, and so, well,
Right.
let's bring them into a place where they can contemplate this through art, and then the whole sensory experience of a typical liturgical service. What you're describing it, I'm thinking, yeah, I could see, in a way, the building off of the traditions of men that we already know about is we've got an incredibly sensory experience. If you walk into an 11th or 12th century church, I have some friends that are Eastern Orthodox monks in Nova Scotia, and I've done a few. I'll just send them an email. I'm not in the East Coast anymore, so I can't do it anymore. But just to get away to a place that's quiet, I would go there and spend a couple of days, and the overwhelming sensory experience of walking into a small chapel that's had uh, um, incense burning for decades and decades and decades, and that all the light is coming through colored paned windows, and it's like it's sensory overload. Even just standing in there is sensory overload, right? And I couldn't imagine being in the rave scene and the sensory overload that you're on there. It sounds a little bit like the Lost Boys of Peter Pan, right?
Yeah.
Coming together, and yeah.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, that's why in San Francisco you have the dual income, which is where I was living at the time. That's why you have the dual income, no kids, Peter Pan syndrome, very common. And that phrase is used openly of people recognizing that they want to remain, childlike and not necessarily immature as long as they can. And the lifestyle, there's endless sense pleasures to enjoy, particularly in San Francisco, for money and enjoy things to enjoy on the weekend. Why would you give your life to the burden of a child when you can continue enjoying yourself,
as
forever?
a child? Yeah.
Yeah. You can continue being the child. Yeah.
Right. So what happens? I'm just curious what happens. You mentioned that the demographic tends to be in that maybe early to late 20s. What happens when people don't ever get out of it and they end up in the 40s and 50s? What happens there? You're observing it.
Yeah. I mean, what would usually happen is people would reach usually around their early 30s and a combination of things. Maybe they would find someone that they fell in love with, or a long-term girlfriend or boyfriend. They're like, wow, we should maybe consider getting married, because I've been together for a while. And so they would start thinking about marriage, and kids is still built into us. Like, it's part of who we are.
Yeah.
And so that instinct is quite hard to suppress, actually. So there's that. Maybe inevitably they wouldn't be able to party as hard, just because, you can party much harder in your young 20s than you can in your early 30s. That's for sure. Yeah, and so, true. A Saturday night or Friday night carries over until like Monday morning. It's like, I can't do this anymore. Sometimes people they just get bored with it, or if people leave, the groups change, new kids start coming in and they don't relate as much to the music that the younger generations like. Or it could just be like, they just get over it, or they hit rock bottom. Right. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why people, begin to take their exit. And usually there's, some people will exit hard. They just exit and they're gone. You don't see them again, and they go and they build a life, and, oh, whatever happened to that guy? Some people will hold on and they'll still try to do some of that old kind of stuff and never fully transcend and let it go. And then some people end up being lifers, holding on to some dream of something that they're not ever fully able to release. And sometimes those people hang around into their 40s and 50s chasing after something that's long gone. And maybe they even catch it later in their life, but it inevitably never turns out to be as good as what they had hoped just because it took so long. I mean, that does happen, but they pay a very high cost in terms of the other things that they miss out on in life, spending 2, 3, 4 nights a week in big, dark, loud rooms with strangers. It's very sad. It's a very sad, it's a very sad world at a certain point once you get to that age. Yeah. Oh, and then of course, the last thing I'll say is, of course, you have the people that made a career and a life out of it. Of course, you have people that were successful in that world, whether they be as promoters or as DJs. Maybe they've cobbled together a nice middle-class lifestyle, but it's very difficult to hold on to. And so unless you hit superstardom and you hit it big, financially, you've got a career with a shelf life for sure. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. Rob, you can interject at any point, by the way.
Yes, please.
And you have any thoughts?
I was thinking about, as you laid out the bones of rave community, going to Burning Man, which was sort of the middle ground where we met you. And I call it the middle ground because it's not conventional church at all, what we were doing. But we were dedicated to bring the presence of God in a form that Holy Spirit coaching us tremendously. There was a learning curve the first 2 to 3 years of really getting it and having the Lord open our eyes to the kind of community they were looking for. And could we enter into it on some level with, principles of the gospel and also the supernatural part of God. Our favorite prayer is kind of help Holy Spirit, because at this junction, it seems like we're making it up as we go along. But as we enter into, we would do these things called encounters with our Burning Man guests, and we'd be totally in the moment. And, we'd be trying new things, and then we'd be going, afterwards, when we would discuss among one another, is that scripturally fit at all? Or no? And we'd have these discussions, and a lot of times we have this is that moment, like you find in scripture. This is what was spoken of in the prophet Isaiah, or this is what we'd had a reference point. But God would just put us on edge with, people that were so far outside our understanding. But I think the thing I wanted to say about community that, and I know I'm jumping ahead to the Burning Man experience, but I think the idea of finding community, that puts you solidly in the realm of Father God, and defining Father God as the source of every good and perfect gift. He's the one. He's the originator from Genesis, right? And then we jump to John. God so loved the world, he gave the highest gift possible, his very own son. So that part of it is very evident in how we viewed, how are we going to father the people that come, because the head of community is Father. And, you go to scripture, I forget where it is. I think it's in Galatians or something. You can correct me, or Ephesians. One version says he's the father of every fatherhood created. And I'm sorry, can't remember the address of that, but
it's in the Bible. That's all right.
Yeah. But we seriously embrace that. I remember having an encounter with God when I took over the leadership of the team, where he says, "You are the mothers and fathers of Burning Man." And it was like, do you believe it? And, nod your head if you agree. And in my prayer conversation early one morning, when it was, I forget what year, 2007, I think, or 2008. And I said, yes. And told the team in our morning meeting, and there was this unanimous, yes, that's who we are. Embrace it, whether you try to internalize it the best you can, because it's truth. It's a lost generation, and we're the closest thing to father, mother that they're going to encounter. And that was a lot of basis of how we came at people like such as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That was the hidden secret sauce, so to speak. We will love you, Lord helping us. We will love you in spite of our maybe shock or lack of understanding of where because we had so many diverse people come through our doors of our tent. We had to adopt this God move through us as a father and mother to help see them. And the first result toward community is we built trust very often in these encounters we had with people within 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is probably the most important thing. It's funny. I think twice in the last 2 days, I've been talking about this with people that have been coming by the house, and a couple of groups I've had is the building the trust was the thing. And then looking at us and just pulling out of them, there's a certain God-given sense. We had this absolute faith that he put eternity in the heart of men. It's in scripture, in every man and every woman. And we were going to believe for that. We were going to find it. We were going to tap into Will Spencer's hunger, maybe in spite of himself or whatever difficulty he's going through. That was our attitude for everyone. Right. And I mean, there were people into really dark things there that you would think like it can't work with them, but very few people were that far gone and you can corroborate this, Josh, too, that far gone that we had to turn away,
Right. Yeah.
There's always
very few and far between that happened. Yeah. It did happen, but
yeah. And I think what they saw is they're looking for, these people are connecting with something higher and something different. And, so they hung around. And then it would get deeper into an actual encounter with God of some form or another. Even if we just held them in our arms and they cried. And we gave them an actual formal father or mother blessing. So I don't want to take up all your time, but that's what I keyed in when I hear you talk about the community of rave. I automatically go to the place like, yeah, that's what they're looking for. In healthy Christian communities, we have a music format. Creativity ought to be super important to us, and in some circles, there's a whole renaissance going on about God is represented by creativity, and sound, light, color. All they speak of God. So,
I have a thought. Just for clarity's sake, too, before I share that thought, we've talked about Burning Man a whole bunch, but I'm sure there's people that are going to be listening that go, "What do they mean, Burning Man?"
What is Burning Man?
Yeah, what is Burning Man? So just as an aside to that, Burning Man is a festival that has been going on since I think it moved to Nevada in the mid '90s, something like that, right? It's been going on in the Nevada,
San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah. It started out in San Francisco. It was a gathering of people who burned a wooden effigy on the beach just outside of San Francisco with the idea of bucking the societal trends, and we're kind of being countercultural, and we're burning the man, so to speak. And so then the move, and I think there was a lot of guns and stuff like that first off as well out in the desert, and a lot of shooting, and it got a bit more formal in that sense. But it's essentially a music festival that takes place in the desert of Nevada now, and that centers around a lot of New Age Eastern mysticism practices, and people go. What was the last number of people that? I mean, remember when I was going out there, it was getting up to 60, 70, 80,000 people for a week
still
long.
There.
It's still there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
about that many go out, and they basically create a city in the Nevada desert and live off grid for a week. And I mean, there's lots of setup and lots of teardown. So their city exists for more than that. And I think you can look on Google Maps and find the city there when you look at the satellite images. And so lots of people go there with it's like kind of their major life experience through the year that gives them the juice to go through the rest of the year. And it's where they find their community, their sense of belonging and purpose. And so what Rob is, the part Rob hasn't said is that there was a group of weird Christians that decided to go out there in the early 2000s. Initially were giving out water to people, and then eventually moved with some others and started essentially a ministry tent with not a very, kind of removing the religious trappings and language to be able to reach into the culture there. And so so that's Burning Man and the team. So what I'm curious about with all of that, I think that's an accurate representation of Burning Man. You could say a lot more about it.
I would say it'd be fair to say there's I'm trying to remember the 10 principles of Burning Man. It's been so long.
Yeah, it has been a while.
But there's a high degree of freedom of self-expression.
There you go. Yeah.
Kind of a man is the measure of all things.
What was your name at Burning Man, Will?
Oak. And Rob and the Spirit Dream people gave me that name.
Did they really? Okay.
Yeah, they did. Well, I have an oak tree tattooed on this bicep now, and I got oak leaves on this one. So.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Rob,
if you get married soon, there'll be acorns.
If only I could bring myself to get more tattoos.
Yeah. So what I'm curious about then, given what Rob shared about the team's thought process in light of what's cluing them or making them think about it in light of the rave scene. So 2015, was that the first time you went to Burning Man? Was 2015?
No, the first time I had been before. The first time I went was in 2003, and then I went back in 2013. So it was my third time at Burning Man.
Okay. So you'd been there a few times before.
Yeah.
So that what Rob described as mothers and fathers, what was your experience like? Why did you go to Burning Man in the first place, 2003 and 2013? And was it just the natural progression of, because now by 2013 you're getting past that mid-20s age as well, correct?
In 2013 I was 35.
Right. So you're kind of on the tail end of what the acceptable ages are in the rave scene in that sense.
Yeah, and getting there. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And so what coming into the team everything too in 2015, what was your experience like? And was what Rob described accurate? And we're fact checking Rob now.
Well, so that's funny. No one's ever asked me that before. Why I went to Burning Man each different time, because there was a different reason each time.
Okay. Right.
The first time I went to Burning Man in 2003. So when I came into the rave scene in 2000 was how I found my way into that world. Y2K actually, like New Year's Eve 2000. I discovered a desire to travel the world. And my family did not travel when I was growing up. I never felt any lack for travel. It was never anything that I had wanted prior to that. It wasn't anything that anyone in my family did. I just suddenly was gripped with this desire, like I really want to travel the world. And it kind of became my North Star for many years. So I went to Burning Man in 2003 because some of my friends were planning to go. They eventually backed out because it's a whole big effort. But I decided that I would go anyway without them to another group of friends who I knew was going to be there. because I thought it was going to be a good first step in learning how to actually backpack overseas. It's like, okay, Burning Man it's an American city, right? It's not like the rest of the states that everyone speaks English, but it's got its own culture, its own way. Can I go, and can my own psychology handle being in this foreign environment for several days? I don't think I was probably there for 5 or 6 days or something.
There's a couple cities I've been to in India that remind me of Burning Man.
Which ones?
Yeah, well, Ludhiana was one for sure, just outside of Ludhiana, going, this kind of feels like it's dusty, there's motorcycles everywhere, and I was like, some of the outskirts of Ludhiana really remind. And then you see these signs that say psychic this way, or new age, or not new age, but yogi, they'd have this guy this way. So I thought, it's interesting. That kind of reminds me of, I've got a picture that I think I've probably showed Rob over the years. It's like, that looks like a little bit like a street in Burning Man. Anyway.
What region of India, just real quick, because I've been to India.
That's
what
Punjab.
Region of Punjab? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's great out there. Yeah, it's a very different culture out there. So, that was why I went in 2003, because I wanted to see if my psychology could handle, because I was very different person back then, very insecure, would sometimes have mood swings and just dealing with a lot of anxiety. And so I'm like, okay, if I take myself out of my stable home environment and I go into this foreign land, will I be okay? And not only was I okay, I totally thrived. Like, I had a great time. So that's why I went in 2003. I went back in 2013 because a couple that had just gotten married, they were doing a ceremony. It was part of their honeymoon to go to Burning Man, and they invited me and my girlfriend at the time to join them in an RV. And so my girlfriend liked RVs. I was a tents guy, so we weren't going to go to Burning Man together unless we went in an RV. An RV became available, so we're going to Burning Man. So that's why I went in 2013. And then in 2015, I had just broken up with that girlfriend. And so I'm like, I can suddenly go to Burning Man now and sleep in a tent and do things my own way. I got nothing else going on. I guess I'm going to Burning Man. And that all came together maybe a week or two before the festival. Like August 1st, 2015, there was no thought in my mind of going to Burning Man. August 20th, 3 weeks later, I'm going to Burning Man, which is how it works in the Bay Area. So that's why I went in 2015.
Is that the first time you met
a Spirit Dream?
Oh, so you hadn't met them before?
No.
Okay. I was there in 2013, so but I
love that thought. Like, we walked past each other.
We might have. I remember one morning, Rob and I jumped on bicycles and rode out in the playa early in the morning. We may have crossed paths at some point out at the temple or the man. So
I love the idea of thinking about all the people who are in our lives now.
Yeah.
If we could look and see the times when we crossed paths with them, or were standing right next to them and had no idea. No clue. Yeah. But so it was as a result of that breakup that I actually ended up at the Spirit Dream tent in 2015, because there's a whole big story of arriving to the festival and why I ended up camping with the people that I did. They weren't expecting me. I just showed up like, hey, everybody. Like, Will, what are you doing here? That's a long story. You got somewhere for me to camp? So I set up my tent, and I woke up the following morning. Let's say I got there on Wednesday, woke up on Thursday. And as I'm getting up and going about my business outside the tent, the guy who's camping next to me gets up and says hi and introduces himself. He's like, what brings you to Burning Man? I said, well, I just went through a breakup. And so we're just out here to, relax, unwind or whatever. And he said, well, if you're grieving over the breakup, there's a camp called Spirit Dream I just went to visit yesterday, and they're great. You should go check them out. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool.
Right.
So that's how I ended up at their camp. And then I think I probably had some breakfast and just rode straight over to the camp. And I think I was the last person seated for the morning session, if I recall. One of the last people. Yeah.
Right. So do you remember meeting Rob for the first time?
Yes, but it was Barb and Katie and Larry were in my encounter group. And then Rob, I'm sure I met you after that whole process was over.
I was kind of the gatekeeper at the door, so to speak, with our co-leader at that time. And so I probably met briefly, or you passed. But usually we would C2 with Katie and Barb and Larry.
Yep.
I was the team lead for Barb's first year, by the way. For 2012, I think I was her team lead for pretty much the whole week. And Barb, in her first year, was terrifyingly nervous and barely said anything. Barely said anything. So it was for many of the days, it was just me and Barb, and I did almost all of the talking because Barb just didn't know. She didn't know what to say. But then the next year, she was like totally different, gung ho and everything. So I remember that. I remember at one point asking Barb, "Can you pray a mother's blessing over this person?" And Barb said, "No, I can't. I'm sorry."
Oh, those our poor team people.
Yes.
I think she said she spent some time in the RV just wailing in tears.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What did she step into it?
Yeah, that's right.
We were kind of a semi-jovial attitude, like, well, why did you join?
Yeah, that's right.
You're gonna be stretched to the max, but we'll catch you and try to hold you. But
yeah. So Will, what was that?
Like,
yeah, she really did. Yeah,
she really.
So that's 2015 Barb is different than 2012 Barb. And
very much so.
Yes. So what was that like coming into? Did you have any clue that the team was anything beyond just some spiritual people? Any indication or anything?
No idea. No idea.
No,
I mean,
I know a couple people would come into the tent and go, "I recognize some of this art. It looks a little bit Christian." Or I remember one girl in 2013, I think, who was from Israel, and she definitely recognized the temple imagery and stuff like that Andrea had put up there, and she was like, "What?" She mentioned it afterwards. So you had no clue though.
No, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I'm sitting in the tent, I'm looking around, and of course, having been to Burning Man, you can walk into a camp and you can kind of figure out what spiritual neighborhood, quote unquote, they're in. Like, there's a Shiva statue, or there's some Alex Gray artwork, or there's a Buddha, or there's an alien sitting on a mushroom. You can get a sense, like, what do these people believe, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting around as I'm in this encounter, looking around at the art, and like, there's a bull, and that's an eagle, and that's like a swirly painting of something. I don't know what that is. And I'm like looking around, being like, well, who are these people? What do these people believe? It was so strange. I'm like, I could not figure out, I was like, I don't know, is this some sort of esoteric weird thing? I don't know. But it looked, all the art was, of course, very, it's Andrea style. So that kind of watercolory, kind of like soft, kind of like pastel kind of thing. So it was all very, very inviting and a very softer feeling. So it wasn't kind of like hard edged, but I was like, where am I right now?
Right.
I think we joked that year. Andrea Barather was our head artist, and it all started in Coeur d'Alene, and we were talking in Calypso's Cafe, where we did our little outreach stuff, and we were talking about, she needed a theme for art, and I said, how about wheel within a wheel? And then we started talking
that's
about
right.
images from Ezekiel. So it finally filtered down to, we decorated what we call the encounter tent in early Ezekiel chapter 1.
Early Ezekiel. Mid-century modern, early Ezekiel, industrial farmhouse.
That's right. Well, and I remember that year, it even went to the point where we laid out all the tiles in the encounter tent, and then the only tiles we had left for the back of the tent were a different color. And so all the tiles in the back of the tent were a different color than the front of the tent. And then there was the sheet that was lowered down, and she had written something in Hebrew. I can't remember what it was.
It was mercy.
Yeah, I think it was mercy. And it was like, and I don't even think this was planned, because I was just kind of going to be if people need just a space after the encounter, they can go back there. And we were like, oh, this is like, it's like the Holy of Holies. You go underneath the curtain and there's a totally different floor here. It was like, oh, we inadvertently created a representation of the temple as well as all of the imagery from Ezekiel. I remember some of it's you kind of stumble into, and some of it was pre-planned. So
yeah, that's true, because we wanted to make, in essence, a chill space for people that were so impacted by God, and we were always uncomfortable about letting them loose to go back into the public space of Burning Man. It's so very eclectic and weird and filled with all kinds of influences. We wanted them to soak in the presence of God, so we created a chill space, and we just happened to choose these angelic wings that said mercy, and God bless the space. In essence,
yeah,
that was people would get their world rocked and just lay back there and soak it in for, sometimes they'd even fall asleep, you know.
Yep.
Yeah. But some of it was semi-intentional. A lot of it just happened.
Yeah.
Suddenly we go, oh, we created a Holy of Holies.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah. So Will, what was there a moment you clued in, like that particular week that you went, oh, maybe they're Christian, maybe or did they say something? Did you come back throughout the week, or?
Oh, you don't know. I guess you don't know the story.
I have no idea what the story is. I really don't. I don't.
Okay. Gosh. Well, I ended up having a 3.5 hour encounter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. With Barb and Katie and Larry. Yeah. We just kept going. I mean, I had done so much inner work stuff in San Francisco and other modalities that I just had an appetite for it. Like, yeah, keep it coming. So I don't know. Do you want me to tell the full story?
Yeah.
Or do you want me to?
Yeah, go for it.
I can answer your question. Okay, cool. So
go for it. I'd love to hear it.
Well, I appreciated, Rob, that you had said that you were trying to be the mothers and fathers of Burning Man, because that was the essence. I don't know that I'd ever heard you say that before, but that was the essence of my encounter, as I'm sure we've talked about before. There were two big turning points of that encounter. I'm sure we talked about a ton of stuff, but the two turning points that I remember was first with Barb. Now, my mother had passed away in 2006. She had ended her own life.
Of course.
Right. And so, but her name was Barbara also. And so here I am talking to Barb, and I don't know at what point I found out that was her name, probably because I said my mother. Barb asked, "What's your mother's name?" Barbara. So probably at that point is when I found out Barb's name.
Right.
But I remember one of the characteristics of my upbringing was I had a very smothering, narcissistic mother. The current term is son husband. When I grew up, the term was spousalizing. The idea that the mother pulls away from her husband and gets her emotional needs met with her son. And so that was what characterized my upbringing, with my mom never wanting to really let me go and just holding on to me as the purpose of her life, essentially.
Right.
And so when I met Barb and started talking to her, now this is 2015 me, like I might be unrecognizable in some ways, but when I was talking to Barb at the time, and she was explaining to me that she had a son, and it was her job to let her kids go, right? She's not supposed to hold on, even though it kills her, even though it hurts her to release her children into the world. She has to sacrifice herself and let that go. As much as it pains her, she has to go, let them go, be adults. And I remember sitting across from her and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I had never heard such a thing before. Like, you just told me something that doesn't exist. This is so completely outside of my paradigm that a mother can actively, consciously, willingly sacrifice herself for her kids, because that was not my my experience. My sister and my father and I all sacrificed ourselves for her in many ways. So that was such a huge paradigm shift to actually encounter that mother energy from Barb's lovely. My mom was very beautiful and the same name. And it was like looking in a mirror in a way. And that was very powerful for me to see that. It was like shocking. And so that was the first sort of touch point. And then later, I'll say probably an hour or so later, we were talking about whatever. I was mostly interacting with Katie and Barb. And I remember Larry had been quiet for much of the encounter. And Larry's an older man. I think he was probably in his late 60s, early 70s at the time. And he was just kind of reclining, not really. he was engaged, but he wasn't really talking a whole lot. And I was talking about my desire to travel the world and my ability to do that. And I was starting to feel inside myself, like this guy over here he's not speaking. And I was starting to feel some sort of judgments, or starting to believe that there were some judgments on his part. And it was really hanging me up. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I just have to stop for a second. And I turned to him, and I didn't want to just assume that I was picking up on something that was really there. Like, I wanted to say, I just want to check something out with you. Like, I'm feeling like maybe I'm being judged or something like that. You know, I wasn't accusing him of doing that. It was just like, this is just what I'm feeling, and I want to check that out with you if that's real. He's like, no, that's fantastic. I think it's awesome that you want to do that. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah, I think it's great. And that was because he was probably holding some of the dad energy as well, you know, feeling some of those judgments and resentments. And so that was I gave him a big hug. And that was a big moment for me as well, to feel like I could be blessed in my desire to travel the world that I mentioned earlier, that I had discovered 15 years earlier. I had held on to that dream for 15 years and never let it go, and never did anything to compromise the ability to make that happen. So I never got married. I never had kids. I never bought a house. Like, I didn't live a transient life, but I lived a life somewhat off the ground to make it possible for me to go do that travel. And I did it for 15 years. And so here I am at Burning Man with this group, like, hey, is it okay for me to go do this travel thing? And they're like, yeah, of course it is. You don't need our permission. I'm like, I don't. I guess I don't, do I? But that's where I was at the time in my life. It was like, I had so stuffed down my own desires, trying to, you know, bend myself into a pretzel for other people, that I was like, the notion of me having this thing that I want and I can just go do it, and needing to get permission from complete strangers, was where I was at. And they gave me that permission. Obviously, I knew I didn't need it at that point, but it's like, okay, cool. So that was a big turning point of my life, that, okay, now I'm actually going to go do this travel thing after 15 years. So that was one of the big things that came out of that whole encounter, was this, you know, shift of my direction. But
that's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll finish the story and then we can unpack it from there. And so we're at the end of the encounter. It had been 3.5 hours, and I'm like, yeah, I think I'm complete. I think I'm good. And so I'm not sure what Katie said. I think she may have said, "Can I pray for you?" Something like that. And it's like, of course. So I think there had been a foot washing as well. I'm like, this is new.
Okay.
So so Katie went to go stand behind me as I'm seated, and she puts her hands on either side of my head, and she starts praying, and I can't hear what she's saying. I can't make out the words that she's saying. And so I've got my eyes closed, and so with my eyes closed, I suddenly have this vision of the playa. I can still see it. And so it's like, there's this playa, the road, and there's all these tents, and the flags are flapping in the breeze. And it's really vivid. And as I'm staying there looking over this scene, this man walks up to me, and he's got goggles on. So I can't really, but I can see the shape of his face and his hair. I'm like, it's there. And I'm like, okay. And then the face, without speaking, seems to insist, like, no, look. I'm like, okay, like, look, I see you. Again, the goggles and the hair and all this stuff. And so then the vision ends, and I open my eyes, and Katie says to me, there's someone I want you to meet. I'm like, okay. So she takes me to the front end of the tent, the other side of the tent. And so when I had walked in, there was this pillar, it seemed, hanging from the ceiling, and I had gone on one side of the pillar and walked down to the encounter tent. She took me to the other side of the pillar that I could not have seen when I walked into the tent. And she walks me to the pillar. She points me up at the tent. She walks me around. She points me up at it, and there was the face that I had just seen with my eyes closed. And you know the face that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, minus the Burning Man goggles.
Right.
So I fell down on my knees and put my head in the dirt and
just
bowed down
stunned.
and just stunned.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do. Like, what do I do?
Right.
I might interject for the audience.
Please.
What he saw was our artist had painted the 4 faces of Ezekiel. We had the eagle, the ox, the lion, and then the face of a man. But for the face of the man, she took a representation of Akiana's picture of Jesus, which we thought is one of the best representations of Jesus out there. And she painted these things on silk And basically, when he looked up, there's Jesus.
Yeah. Do you want to see a photo of me? I can show you the photo of me on my knees.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can, if I can share my screen. Yeah, it looks like I can. Allow. Let's see. Window. There it is. You see that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. You can see, here's the, I don't know if you can see my mouse. There's the top of my head, because I put my top of my head in the dirt, and you can see my dirty toes, my dirty feet from standing.
Oh, so you had just come down. You're on the feet, you're on your knees, and you would just put your head into the dirt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know who took that photo, but I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that they did. And I think it was at that. Yeah, it's an amazing shot. I'm so glad to have a photo of that moment. I almost can't believe that it's real. That I have that. So I think I think it was at that moment or earlier. I'm like, who are you people? And they're like, we're Christians. Like, what are you doing here? You know? So, and they explained, and I love this part. When I was with Katie there on the dirt, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I know who that is, but let me make sure I ask, like, is that Jesus? Because I mean, because it didn't have the long hair and all that. I just wanted to make sure, like, this isn't some guru or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
right, for sure.
I'm pretty sure that's Jesus, but let me, because I knew if I went away later, I'd be like, am I really sure that was Jesus or some other guy?
Right.
So that's
a wise spiritual question when you have an encounter with a high level being. Are you Jesus or not?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's the question that we're directed to ask in Scripture, something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're being very scriptural without even realizing it before, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's amazing. I haven't heard the story at all, so that's fresh ears being able to hear it. But I mean, having had for 3 years doing the Burning Man thing, like, that's just amazing what happens with people. And yeah. So you go, what are you guys? Like, there was something. Yeah, who are you people? Yeah. And so they told you. Yeah. Did you hang out a little bit or do it? Because if you're the last person before, well, you guys went right through lunch then at that point. If you were the last person let in. How did you so you stayed in contact? Was that the end of your contact with them in 2015 at Burning Man, or did you just keep coming back? And
yeah, I don't remember what I left, and I don't remember what I did for, I don't know, the next day or so. I did meet up with you guys again at least one more time. This would have been on Thursday, I think, when I walked into the tent. And so I either got together with you guys on Friday or Saturday before you guys were packing up to leave, something like that. So I did come see you guys again at least one more time. But then I think it was probably on the playa you told me about the Art of Hearing God class that you were doing in Carson City, Nevada, which would have been in October. And so I drove up to Carson City for that from the Bay Area. And I still have my Art of Hearing God book.
There you go.
That I got. This is the one that I got from that weekend. I kept it.
Right.
So.
Right, there it is. Yeah. I recognize that very well.
And then I went.
So what was that like? What was that like? The going to
you're glitching out again.
Oh, is that? Hopefully we're. Can you hear me? And is it working okay?
Yep, you're back.
Okay, good. What was the intervening months? Right, you've got this profound moment with Barb, with Katie, with Alan, with Jesus, and then you're waiting until what? So it's been 3 months, 2 or 3 months until the Carson City thing. What was that? What was the intervening moments like? Was it like, did that really happen? Was it? Did things germinate more? What was going on inside at that point?
Yeah, I think you've glitched out for most of that question. So I think I picked up on some of it. What were the intervening months like? So yes. I wouldn't say that I didn't get converted at that time. I was still of the mindset that all religions are equal paths up the mountain. And so I had just collected the Christianity Pokemon in a sense, Hinduism, Buddhism, all this different stuff. So like, oh, cool. Now I've had an encounter with Christians because they're hard to come by in San Francisco, or at least I thought they were.
Sure.
I had not encountered any, but I believed, that the Spirit Dream folks were faithful Christians, and they are. But it wasn't the sort of experience where I walked away thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get saved, or I got to read the Bible, or anything like that. It was just I just put it up on the shelf with the other religions and continued on my way. And it was after that I got into ayahuasca, which perhaps we can talk about. And I just continued in my new age kind of practices and beliefs. But I think what really changed for me, I went to the Art of Hearing God class. I didn't quite know what to make of any of it.
Sure.
I mean, I listened to it and I took it in. I'm like, okay, they're clearly very sincere about what they believe. I don't understand it at all. I didn't reject it,
right.
But I just didn't understand it. I didn't have a framework to understand it. But I do remember there was another couple that were clearly from the Bay Area as well, perhaps burners, that were sitting there, and they got up and they left the first day because it was too much Jesus for them. So, but I stayed through the whole course, even though I couldn't understand really what was going on, because it wasn't for me technically. But then,
right.
Then I went to spend Christmas up in Coeur d'Alene, and it was that Christmas that actually really began to shift things for me, because I got to see that the people that they were on the playa is who they were in private as well.
Right.
That they were equally joyful and warm and inviting and loving, and they were nothing like any of the other Christians that I had met, not in my Catholic high school, or not in Silicon Valley, where I had known a Christian man, I believe. Oh, we lost him. He's gone. I'll keep talking.
We're adrift without the host.
We'll just play it cool. Everything's fine. So, so anyway, just to finish answer the question, it was spending time with you guys that Christmas that I think really planted something in my heart of like, okay, there's something to pay attention here, because it was that personal bond that was formed that got me recognizing that this is not like some abstract thing. This lives in people. And so that contact that we had, while I was overseas traveling for that 4 years, that continued to kind of like keep me on a line connected to you guys, so I couldn't go flying off into the cosmos, and I could always check in with you. And so that was what really did it for me.
Yeah. And we saw that, there's an exchange of light between us. We saw that transpiring in you. And I think it was equally important to us that as a core value, there's this thing about you're different on the mission field, or you're different when you're doing this thing called evangelism than you are in your default world. We in a sense, we have none of that, where, there was an intentionality of building our own sub-Christian community where we're going to live like this all the time, like we mean it, and what you see is what you get, warts and all. But, nothing to hide, and so on, do the best we can. So
I think I'm back.
Thank you. Thank God that you noticed it.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't help but yes, you are back, Josh. We can hear you now.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but I couldn't miss it. I mean, I remember, I think it was one of the first nights I was there, maybe the first night we were at Barb and Andrew's house. And I remember like, oh, here's Andrew's a hunter, so here's some bear, and here's some pheasant, and here's some rabbit, and here's some wine. And, it was so joyful. And I never felt any pressure. I never felt like there was any expectation, and I remember, I think it was Barb who might have like sort of accidentally invited me. Oh, you should come up and join us sometimes. Like, oh, well, I have all these air miles that I have to use before I go overseas, so I can come up. And so it was just very welcoming and inviting. And I never felt like I was, not that I anticipated feeling like I was trapped or anything like that. I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect it, but it was just, we were just all happy to be around each other, and you were happy to have me there. And I think that was what left an impression. I might have been open to a conversation about these things, but I don't think I would have been ready for it. I might have sat down and had a conversation, but I don't know that I would have had a framework to understand Christianity, because I still had to spend another 5 years building that.
Right. I remember doing an outreach one time at a farmer's market, and just by way of, this is all in a short 15-minute window, but by way of comparison, and we were working with a lady who was new to the team, and a group of young women who went to a local college had a dream that they wanted some insight into, which had to do with taking a test and not showing up for class, that kind of thing. And so we interpreted the dream. Yeah, it's a pretty common dream, but we interpreted the dream, and the girls were really like, "Oh my goodness, that's exactly how we feel." They were very warm and open. And then the lady goes, "So now are you ready to give your life to your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?" Yeah, and it was like the walls just went right up, and they turned around and walked right away. And I was like, no, not yet. Right? Like, just give the person time to process things, think through this profound thing you've said to them, and maybe they'll come back to you, but maybe they'll come to someone else later and there'll be another interaction, but you just got to let it go at that moment. And you can't, you're not ready for a conversation. You've got to piece things together. What in that, so you had 5 years of piecing things together where you took the call to travel pretty seriously at that point. I was looking at the Facebook and seeing you were all over the place, in India. And I think I noticed you said you were in Singapore, and
South America, Asia.
Okay. I've been to Singapore and India, both. I love both those places. I'm curious, in that window of time, as you were piecing together, maybe your worldview is kind of being disassembled a little bit, and you're looking at different things. Because in the New Age community, like, there's Jesus is a great teacher. He's oftentimes referenced. You look at books like The Secret that take all kinds of biblical truth and rip out the kind of redemptive death to self, cross, all that kind of stuff. And so what were there challenges for you in that sense, theologically? I mean, I'm sure there were theologically, but just disassembling some of those common mischaracterizations of who Jesus is, what he's like. Was that part of the 5-year journey? Or was it just really going, like I told you, that your story reminded me a bit of this Greek Orthodox guy who wrote his autobiography, The Guru's the Young Man and Elder Paisios, where he goes, has an encounter with Jesus through Paisios, and actually wanders around in stupor for like 3 days going, what just happened to me? And then decides to go to the yogis in India to study under them, and just gets like, he just gets really messed up. Wow. And then eventually he actually has a vision. Paisios shows up in a dream and dispels a bunch of demonic strongholds, and eventually he comes back and realizes that through the intercession of Paisios, he's been saved from that, and now he's on his journey to Jesus. So anyway, it's not that there's all that much crossover, but when Rob and Barb were telling me the story, I thought, oh, I remember that story. So I'm just curious what that disassembling and putting back together was like for you, or if you would even think of it that way.
I didn't have too many preconceived notions of Jesus, just because I didn't know how to properly encounter Christianity.
Okay, right.
It's not part of the New Age world, really. It's
not
actually
even through any of the Jewish or Jesuit. Not really.
I mean, I think growing up Jewish, I knew that I could be anything I wanted, just not Christian.
Right.
I knew that.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was never said to me outright, but I think I just picked it up kind of environmentally. Yeah. It's not uncommon at all.
Yeah.
And I don't recall in the Jesuit high school hearing the gospel, hearing too much about Jesus. I remember sophomore year, I had a biblical textual criticism class, and there were some moral discussions, but there was never a moment. There's of course many masses I was required to attend,
sure,
but there was never a moment where I felt like I was being introduced to who Jesus was as a person.
Were they in English or were they in Latin?
They were in English.
They were in English, yeah.
I mean, they might as well be in Latin as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what's going on here.
Right.
They didn't make any effort to explain it either. So I don't really know why, but that's how it was. Or at least I don't remember if they did.
Yeah.
But in the New Age world, Jesus isn't talked about very much. It's excluded. Like we don't talk about that. Now, the way that Jesus shows up in that world, at least in my experience, was Jesus didn't exist. He was mythological. He wasn't real. Buddha was real. Jesus was not real. I did have that idea. And we can talk about that. And the other idea I had encountered that I don't think I ever really found compelling was the idea of like Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
The idea that Jesus was a man like any other man, and he had attained such a high level of spiritual realization. He had embodied this transcendent Christ energy.
Right.
So I think those were the only two ideas that I really had. When I worked for a tech company in 2000, the startup that I had done, I worked with a man who he was a Christian, but he was I think charismatic lowercase c and uppercase c, where he would just sit at his computer. I was the only person who like got along with him because I found him entertaining. But he would sit at his computer and be like, "Praise Jesus, praise the Lord, shabam!" Like working on graphics. He's a graphic designer, and so all day long, like praise Jesus, just like that. And I just found him. He was a trip, and so his name was Jeff, and he was a friend of mine. But that was really the only experience I'd really had. And I guess one time in summer 2001 to summer 2002, he and I kept in touch. I was in a really low place emotionally, and I was like, I just need to talk to somebody.
Sure.
And so he and I talked for a while, and he kind of manipulated me into doing the sinner's prayer. And I could tell you that that did not make me saved at the time. If it did, it took about 18 years to kick in, something like that. So,
but you made Jeff feel good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I walked away feeling really gross after that, and I never spoke to him again after that. And so, like, those were really the only experiences that I had with Christianity. Like growing up Jewish, knowing I can't be Christian, knowing that they were the big political bad people out there in the world, what I mean, especially from within the San Francisco worldview, and some distant ideas. But it was something that I just had. It was very unformed, and so that's why meeting the Spirit Dream folks and coming to Coeur d'Alene was so powerful for me, because I finally met people who embodied Christianity in a way that somehow I knew that they were supposed to. I couldn't have told you anything. I just knew that Christians were supposed to be this kind of person, and I just hadn't experienced it. So then I met people who were that kind of people, and that really made an impression. But I didn't have so much to unwind in my perceptions of Jesus, really more Christianity as a religion, but I didn't have much formed about it to begin with. In fact, I would probably say I knew very little about Christianity at all, at all.
Right. I'm in one sense, I guess the background for my question is a guy I used to play basketball with who always had questions about Jesus, but was heavily influenced by New Age authors, at least. Yeah. So he'd read about the Christ consciousness thing. He'd read about how Christ was a great teacher. And so he really liked the idea of religious syncretism. And so he'd always have questions for me. Yeah. But it was really hard to actually have a conversation with him because, I read this guy and he said this, and so we just kind of discount anything that had to do with actual Jesus divinity, except for one time when he twisted his ankle in a game and pretty bad. And I said, "Can I pray for you?" So I did. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I like prayer. Yeah." And then the next day I saw he posted on Facebook and he said, "Look at what my vegan my vegan diet has done. I twisted my ankle so bad yesterday. It's perfectly fine today." And I commented, or I sent him a message and I said, "Or it could have been Jesus and the prayer." And he's like, "I forgot about that. That's right." Yeah. So I was like, "Oh,
better response than I expected."
Yeah. Well, he was open. So there was the kind of the follow-up to him was I'd had these conversations, but I just couldn't. He invited me to this syncretistic religious Facebook group, and he always he'd tag me in every question that you'd get some of the dogmatic Christian responses that he's going, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, how do I read the Bible with the Holy Spirit? These people are telling me I can't read the Bible. And how do I do that? So he'd tag me, right? Because these people wouldn't explain it to him. Yeah. So he always had these questions, but I could never quite get through to him. And then this one guy who was a worship leader in the area ended up passing away quite suddenly. He got sick. And when everybody was doing the Facebook memorial thing, then this guy I knew tagged this worship leader on Facebook. I was like, what the heck? How did he know him? And he said there was one day where they crossed paths hiking, because both of them are avid outdoors people, and they struck up a conversation as they were crossing paths and ended up chatting for quite a while about Jesus. And the worship leader had encouraged him to read John with a fresh set of lenses and ask questions. And this guy said, now that you've passed away, I'm going to do that in memory and honor of you. I thought, so interesting that, that God puts him. So I don't know what ever happened with that guy, but I know that God had things along the way. So I was thinking kind of about him when I was wondering if you had if you had to contend with some of those things. Like, I know he had to, very heavily influenced by that stuff. But
I think, no, not so much. I think it took me a minute. And by a minute, I would say maybe a year, less than 2, to recognize that all other world religions are false.
Okay.
Because I think for a while I was like, well, all religions are equal paths up the mountain, but Christianity is the only one that gets you that last little bit of the way. I think I might have had some idea like that floating around, but it was a real big moment where I was like, well, wait a minute. If Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one can come to the Father except through him, then everything else out there is false and going the wrong way.
Right. What was that moment like? Was it just that, or was there, what was the how did that alter everything?
It was really scary, but not for me.
Right.
I suddenly got very scared for the world.
Sure.
I'm like, wait a minute. If this is real, and I believe what this says is true, then this entire world is drowning in darkness.
Right.
And it just made me terrified because I had been to India, I'd been to South America, I'd been to all these countries that showed not the slightest presence of Jesus anywhere. Not that I was paying attention, but I didn't really see it. And I was like, I've been to the Kumbh Mela Hindu festival, which at the time in 2019 was the largest human gathering in history, 250 million people. They just did another one that had 400 million people.
Wow.
Right? It's massive.
Yeah.
And so I had been, and it's 1000% straight up Hinduism. People travel across the entire country.
Sure.
Deeply impoverished people travel across the entire country to bathe in the Ganges River, and sit at the teaching of countless gurus, to get favor from the gods.
Right.
On Vedic astrologically auspicious dates and times. I'd been there. And so here's 200 million people in one country. There's how many people are in India? 1 billion? Just lost in darkness.
I think, yeah.
And that was really shocking. It was really, really shocking to me. But I couldn't find any conclusion other than that. Like, well, this must be true, and this must just be how it is. It was a profoundly humbling moment as well, to recognize that, like, this wasn't due to any goodness on my part that I've been given this. Right. So
what was it? So were you reading you read the verse? What was because there's lots of people who've read the whole Bible and not come to that conclusion, right? They've come to a completely opposite.
Very closely.
They didn't read it very closely. No, Jesus says in John 14, "I'm the way, the truth, and no one comes to the Father except by me," right? And so you see that, and it grips you.
Yeah.
Right. Like in a very profound, life-altering way. And this sounds a little bit like, like I was saying earlier, Anthony the Great going, though your sins are as scarlet, I've made them white as snow. And it grips him and forever changes his life. Right.
Yeah.
And so what it was it the private study? Did you hear someone speaking it? What was that moment?
I don't remember. I honestly don't remember.
Right.
I think because I didn't really start reading the Bible daily until 2023. And so I already knew that by 2021, 2022. So I don't know whether it was a YouTube video or a book that I was reading.
Interesting, right?
Or someone that I was talking to. I honestly don't remember when it hit me for the first time. But I remember, I don't remember why it hit me, but I remember that it did.
Maybe
it was maybe it was the Holy Spirit. I can remember I was standing in my apartment. I remember right where I was standing too. I could have just been thinking about it.
Right.
And yeah, it was a real moment. And I think in that moment, I just chose not to fight it because, there's lots of ways to respond to that. Like, no, surely all these people can't be lost. Surely there's some other way, or, and it's like, well,
right,
maybe not. Right.
Right.
And yeah, that was a big moment.
It's the Bart Ehrman who's basically wants to get rid of the whole Gospel of John because it's a later invention, right? It's Jesus actually claiming to be God. And so there's all kinds of ways people try and remove that moment. And so, wow,
it's so wrong. It's so deeply, deeply wrong to try and do that. You're depriving people of the one hope that they have in this world for fear of whatever hurting their feelings or whatever. Why would you, who cares? Like, hurt their feelings. Don't do it intentionally to hurt their feelings, but hurt their feelings, save their souls,
Right.
But, yeah. And I see that everywhere. I mean, I see that people trying to soften the edges of that. And, of course, it's fair to say, like, none of us know what's on the other side, but we know what Scripture says, and this is what it says. And so if that's true, then there's a charge to go and disciple the nations. And that's why he says that, and it's not without precedent as well. I mean, look at Noah, right? Look at Abraham, Moses. Like, it's not some new thing that the whole world is lost, and salvation comes from a very small set of people. Well, the new thing is that there's millions of those people on earth today. That's the new thing. If you go back to, Noah's day, everybody was wiped out because they were all lost except for one guy. Right. So it's not a new thing.
Yeah. You got any thoughts, Rob? You seem pensive.
No, I was thinking we hadn't let go of Will in his wild journey of 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, because he would post pictures, or I don't know if you sent any directly to us, but I think we followed you on Facebook.
Yeah,
and he's a great kind of photojournalist about this whole journey, and of course. Our point was, what's he doing now? Doing ayahuasca 10 times and doing high-level Buddhist meditation. So, we did all we can do to pray. We just said, Lord, what was deposited at him at our house, at Burning Man, and any other source? We jealously cover that in prayer and declare God's word will not fall short of its goal of hitting the mark.
Right.
God's word will endure in a man, and I think that was our main basis for prayer. We weren't. I guess to say we weren't overly alarmed. We were surprised at what this gentleman put himself through. As I wryly said, I think he's stress testing everything to the max, and I mean, I'm just amazed that Jesus in your process, and that's the question. Were you aware at various points when you're doing these crazy things? And you told us some amazing stories about how weird and degrading the whole ayahuasca thing was. It seemed to me it was very obvious that God was, looking over your shoulder, standing by you in some form.
I don't know that I would say that I felt that presence. I mean, it would be easy for me to read back into my experience, that feeling, but I can see it now. I was definitely protected from the worst consequences of my decisions, all kinds of drugs, altered states, spiritual practices, in India and Bali and stuff like that. So I could see, and I went for it. I don't do anything halfway. And so I really went for it. And I can see now that God was protecting me. My experience was that I was never looking for belonging. I think what catches a lot of people in the New Age is the same thing that catches a lot of people in the rave scene. They're looking for something to belong to. And I was no longer looking for anything to belong to. I was traveling with a genuine spiritual curiosity, like, help me understand. Okay, let's do ayahuasca, show me the worldview, and then let's take the worldview apart from the inside. or here's Buddhist meditation. Show me this and let me take it apart from the inside. Because I was looking for truth. I wanted to understand. I don't want to be part of this community of meditators. Like, great, I'm glad that you're all happy with it. I'm glad that you're all doing ayahuasca and you're all friends, and that's fantastic. I want to understand. And so, and I think I can give that to God as a form of protecting my own mind from giving myself over to anything, and always maintaining it, like committing to it and doing the thing, but always maintaining a sort of intellectual remove. Even when I was in the depths of my ayahuasca experiences, 7 ceremonies in 12 days at a retreat in Peru. And then I had done 8 other ceremonies in other circumstances. But even in the midst of that cycle of 7, I was taking notes in my head about the whole experience. And I observed that, like, wow, I'm still here taking notes on my own experience and I'm not lost in it. And I think that was a big part of it. It was that I didn't want to belong. I didn't want to just have the experience. Like I even said before I left to travel, this was March of 2016, that I even said that I was looking for God. Now I didn't know what that meant. I had a particular conception in my mind, roughly, but I was sincere about it, even though I didn't know what I was saying. And so I was looking with the intent to discover and learn. And I think that protected me in many ways from being like, oh, this is fun and I enjoy this. Let me just hang around. It's like, well, I got a nice experience out of this, but maybe I didn't find, let me go try the next thing. And so I tried all the things until there was one thing left. And that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
What? You have a thought? Go ahead, Rob.
It's just a little comment, and I don't know, it's something I always think of is there's tremendous agency God gives humanity. I always say one of the 2 most blessed things God gives us is hunger, that ability to ask questions and go deep. And it's such a wonderful gift. The other thing is free will. That he's so audacious to give humankind goes, you need to come to me of your own volition, period. No manipulation, no, something that's so rooted in your own heart, because with the heart, man believes unto righteousness. I give you that freedom to work that out. And I also give you that power of free will to, even in a state of where you were, it was pretty obvious that these boundaries, I like to paint in the picture of free will. You'd say, no, I don't need that to be, I'm not going all the way in. All right. There are points in this journey, at least the way I heard you tell the full version of it. You just said, nope. Even in the midst of some of that ayahuasca stuff, there was this will to say, no, you're not getting any further with me. Is that correct? And I don't want to.
Yeah, I never.
Appropriate here, but
yeah. I would say that there were circumstances where I said, I was like, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I want to do more of this. I don't know if I want to be part of this community or make this my religion, because people do make little subsets of the New Age their religion. There's that. And I think there were also circumstances where God said to me, no, you're not going to study that anymore. Like I studied tarot and Kabbalah for 2 years in San Francisco before I left to travel. And so it was 2 years of a 15-year curriculum as part of an actual school that taught this stuff. And so I got to the end of, I did 3 courses, 2 years of daily training and study in total. And I was never able to progress beyond that to the next, because I think I saw everything that I needed to. And then God snatched me out of that. Okay, you've seen what you needed to, and now you're going to move on. So I think there was part of me, it's like, this doesn't seem, I know that there are a lot of people in this room that are really part of this thing. They like this teacher, they like this teaching, and this is now the whole framework of their life. I'm not interested in that. Next thing. And there were things God's like, oh, Will likes, I did enjoy that study. He's like, nope, you're done. So it's both.
Right. So with the rave scene, getting involved in that, and you mentioned that one of the most powerful attractants is that sense of belonging, and that you were deeply insecure, anxious, and all of that at that point in your life, right?
Yeah.
And so the rave scene, part of the attractant for you was that sense of belonging then. And then
very much so.
Right. And then the maybe we call them the Will Spencer experiential years. The sense of belonging wasn't really what drove you. It was really a desire to understand and find what is true and what's not. Right. That'd be fair to say. Yeah. So
yeah, that's
I'm curious.
Let me interject something in that really quickly. Yeah.
Yep.
So because I've never actually your question helped me put this piece together. So one of the reasons that I no longer needed that sense of belonging was because I had studied and put into practice so much about what it means to be a man, that I had cultivated my own sense of being a man going forward to 2013, to these men's groups, coming to understand my own individual separate identity as a man, my, as Rob said, my free will to self-determine my life. That's why I ended that relationship, which sent me to Burning Man, because I was in a relationship with a woman she was 20 years older than me. It was not a great relationship. It was not a healthy relationship. It was not going anywhere. She couldn't have kids even if she wanted to, and she didn't. But I wanted to travel, and I wanted to be a husband, and I wanted to be a father. And it was in that summer of 2015, as part of being in these men's groups and part of going to therapy, that I had discovered that my desire to travel and my desire to be a husband and a father, ultimately, these were good desires. There was nothing wrong about these things. And even if it hurts someone else, that doesn't make the thing itself wrong. So I spent 15 years learning what it means to be a man, to be able to say, this is me, this is who I am, this is the direction I'm going. I don't mean to hurt you. I know it hurts, but I'm not trying to hurt you. This is the direction I'm going to go. And so I ended the relationship, which is what sent me to Burning Man. So I was already carrying, which is why I met Spirit Dream. So I was already carrying this separate self-identity of knowing who I was in a really good way, of being like, okay, I'm good inside this mind, heart, and body. And so now I can take this on the road and know that I don't need to give myself over to something unless it's the right thing. I've never actually put those pieces together. So thank you.
Yeah. And so then you're welcome. I'm just thinking out loud in a way. I guess that's what you do when you're interviewing. So in a way, when Barb and Alan, quote unquote, gave you permission to pursue the dream, it was just the icing on the cake at that point. It kind of signed off on all the things that have been going on beneath the surface of, this is my identity and I can actually make decisions for myself and be my own entity. And, I'm not to say it wasn't profound. I'm just like, it was kind of the culmination of years of putting that together.
Well, it wasn't, I think you're directionally right. Like, I had taken this desire and I had never given up on it, but I had stuffed it down so far inside myself that I thought it was never going to be. And so overcoming that relationship was such an enormous effort. It took months, and it just caused all these ripples throughout my life. In many ways, there's still impacts of it, and people who shouldn't be involved, who are quite mad at me for ending this thing 10 years ago, essentially. But getting over that hill required such enormous expenditure of energy that it was only once I got to the other side that I realized, like, after having talked to Barb and it was Larry, and saying, Larry, I can do this now. Is this okay? Right? Like, because I knew that I could self-determine to end the relationship and send my life in a new direction. But that was the moment where it dawned on me, like, oh, wait, I can actually do this thing. And it's been 15 years of holding on to this dream and suppressing it. Like, I want to go do it right now, but being committed in this situation that was over is like, oh, can I go do this now? and so, yes, it was the culmination. Like, I didn't really need their permission, but like, for me to be able to speak that was a little bit like, is it okay if I do this now? Is that really possible now?
Yeah. I love that before you explored your life dream, you found not even a sense of belonging. And because I was thinking, part of me, I'm thinking, was it the experience with the team and going at Christmas and everything? Did that help you foster a sense of belonging? In some semblance it may have. There's someone, I know, when you have the kind of, spiritual mom and dads that Barb and Rob can represent, they can make, I have some in my own life, and Rob's been one. in my life is, oh, I actually feel comfortable just being myself because I can finally express myself and know they're just doing it judgment free and they love me. And and it's a sense of freedom. It's one of the things that has been said on this podcast a couple times. Murray likes using this story where he's meeting with one of his friends who's an Orthodox priest, and he's kind of goading him, saying, why do you guys take all your best people and lock them up in monasteries? Why do you do this? And they're all hidden away, and they're all the ones that are teaching on prayer and all this and knowing God, and you're hiding them away in the monastery. Why do you do that? And the priest goes, his name's Father Mike, he goes, well, I mean, we don't really hide them in monasteries, I mean, you can go to the monastery, you can visit them, you become friends with them, and they'll pray for you, and eventually they become like a spiritual father or spiritual mother to you. And he turns to Murray and he says, Murray, in your church culture, where do you guys find spiritual fathers and mothers? And Murray's, dumbfounded at the question because it's not really baked into the culture. Sometimes we stumble into it, and we're fortunate to have stumbled into it. But in the evangelical church, it's not necessarily planned because so much impetus is put on the head pastor to do that for everybody. And it's something that young men and women need desperately, is spiritual fathers and mothers to pour into their life and say, it's going to be okay. You can try and fail. Like I like saying to friends of mine about my good friend Steve, who Rob has met a couple times, that Steve makes you feel so comfortable that anything you screw up, he can fix. And so I can just try and be the things that I'm called to be. And if I mess things up, I can go, Steve, help. And I know he'll be there to help. But it just gives you a freedom to just express yourself. And I go, and it's not so much that Steve has to always go, Josh, it's okay. You belong, you belong, you belong. But I've experienced that sense of, oh, it's okay to be myself because I've got moms and dads that have poured into me. And now I don't have to find my place of belonging anymore. I can belong within myself, just being me, and then being a dad, being a husband, being a friend, and go, let's start a podcast, because I can just be myself. And, in a way, I kind of hear a similar sense of direction in your story of that. You're comfortable in yourself, and then you go, then it's after that you go, I'm going to explore all these other things, which makes sense, like, well, let's dissect. I think I said to you the other day that when we were chatting that the various different learning styles, right? Visual, auditory, kinetic. And then one of the ones that really speaks to me is the argumentative learning style. I want to understand the idea from the inside out so that I can pull it apart and see, is it right or not? And if it's wrong, I don't want it anymore. Right.
That's right.
Yeah, and in a way, you did. I thought I was an all-in person, but Will, I think you're putting me to shame in that sense.
I am a fully all-in. I am a fully all-in person. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So what makes Will tick today now? Like, what's the thing that really gets you? I know part of it is you had mentioned with the podcast now is trying to help people make sense of what's happening in the modern world. But even beyond the surface of that, your desire to be a husband and father, that's still alive and well, and the Lord's working there. And so what are the things that make you tick in the sense of, if you could do anything, what would it be that you'd want to see change, transform? What would you want to do? Those kind of things.
I mean, I do what I love now, and God has blessed me massively, because the same skills that I bring to the podcast, which is a lot of listening, a lot of asking questions that you're familiar with, having big conversations about big ideas, reading, and that same set of skills is what I bring to counseling. It's the same thing,
right?
Obviously I ask less personal questions, and I have to be careful of that. In some of my interviews, I can see things that they're saying. It's like, well, I want to ask that, but that might be a little much to ask.
It would be touching something.
Yeah, exactly. I have to be careful about that, but it's the same set of skills. And so God has blessed me to get to be able to do that, and to be able to do that. Like, I said this just the other day, actually. Like, if you had told me 5 years ago where I would be today, I would have said, you're out of your mind. You know, Will in 5 years you're going to be a Christian evangelist podcast host. And I was like, what? You're going to be on camera in front of a microphone a couple times a week? I'm like, whatever.
Right.
Forget it. Yeah. Right. But God has blessed it. I continue to, I do the work, and God has really blessed the work with incredible increase. And it's incredible. I've got 30,000 followers on Twitter and 20,000 followers on Instagram, and about to cross 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. And people like what I have. They like what I have to say, and they like what I have to say, and they like the space, I think, that I create for my guests. I think they appreciate that when I have a guest on my podcast, I actually read their book. I'm careful not to book guests that I don't want to read their book, so that I can have an intelligent conversation. And they're always very grateful when I ask them questions from the thing that they've invested so much of their life into.
Yeah.
And I enjoy passing that on to my guests. So, what fires me up right now is continuing to do that, grow in that, do some more of my own content, my own thoughts. Just because I'm new relatively in this world of Christianity, and I don't want to come in saying like, look at me, I'm brand new and I know all these things that I now need to tell you. Like I believe very much in spending my time at the feet of great teachers before I have anything to say. And so that's been the great blessing of the podcast, is just, I joke, if you call a random famous or successful person and say, hey, do you want to talk on the phone for an hour? They say no. Say, do you want to talk on the phone for an hour and I'm going to record it and put it on the internet? And they say yes. So it's a great opportunity to get to talk to incredible teachers who have blessed my life. And so I do what I love. I do what I love now. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm just thinking about how one of the things that the refrain that some of my friends and I use is, it's better to be a voice of clarity than a voice of confusion. And because people are trying to make sense of the modern world and what's got us where we are today, and how do I categorize all those things? In a way, that's the prophetic voice. That's what the prophetic voice is supposed to be, as opposed to kind of the charismatic prophets and how, kind of the madhouse of what that's become, but actually making sense of what is the world like. Really, that's the ministry of Jesus too. On one level, this is what everything's like. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. If you look at me, you're going to see what it means to be a human walking this earth alive and alive and connected with God. And, that's one layer of what the ministry of Jesus was. This is what life is. This is what the kingdom is. And so desperately. And I think that's one of the reasons people gravitate towards people like a Jordan Peterson, who helped them make sense of, this is what the world's like, and this is why it's got that way. And they become such a touching point for culture, because I think, in a way, that's why people vote for Trump. Like, well, what he says about politics makes sense. And they go, that I can categorize that. I can think about that. Right. It's with so many competing voices. It's one of the most difficult things to do today, to make sense of it. So well done, Will, on bringing that together and really making that your life pursuit. It's so desperately needed. So
that's a blessing from God. And I think a big part of the message that I try to deliver to people is you, the listener, can make sense of this. Like, I believe in your capacity to assemble these pieces. Like, I don't want to spoon feed people. I don't ever want to position myself as the guy who has all the answers, or because I'm not. But I can ask the right questions of really smart people. And I believe very much in the intelligence of my listeners and their ability to process and understand and assimilate this information for themselves, despite whatever their habits are, despite, our short attention span from devices, despite their upbringing or their belief about their education. Like, no, I believe in you, the listener, as being able to process this information and let it enrich your life. And so I try to communicate that in what I do.
It's a very fathering thing to do. It really is, to try.
What are the odds?
Yeah, that's right. Cool. That's right. It very much so is.
Go figure that would become, I think that would become our base level, I don't know, atmosphere, aura about us is, they've been with Jesus and they become fathers. And I think, looking at it from the 30,000 foot level, we're looking for a fulfillment of what the fivefold ministry looks like, specifically the restoration of a prophet and apostle. And fathering is really key to that. They are fathers, but also they are wise master craftsmen, which, do a dive through scripture at that word wise master craftsman, you're going to end up right at creation. Wisdom was there as a wise master craftsman, and Paul's words about knowing how to fit things together, Ephesians 4, knowing how to connect joints, and knowing how to create families and structures. And this extends even into the structures of business. I work with a lot of business people and entrepreneurs that happen to be in our Sunday night group, Thursday night groups, and it's getting more exciting as they see their design and how it works in business structures. They're doing better than a lot of pastors with their understanding on people dynamics and fitting people together according to their design. And some people just don't fit on certain areas, and they're beginning to use religious constructs to explain it rather than the business books, which makes me very excited. Like, they're recognizing these things come from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, in a world that seems turned upside down, especially from COVID, I'm beginning to see like COVID was a blessing from the Lord, because nothing ever went back to normal.
Yeah.
Right.
Not really. I mean, people tried to do church again. People tried to do this and that and business again. Some businesses failed. Some, the world is literally, as God said, I will shake everything that can be shaken. But the good news is there are things that can't be shaken.
Yeah.
That's the nature of God and his principles, and of course scripture, and the consistency of God. So you gentlemen are in a good pocket, for pursuing that kind of thing. As God leads you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. That's very encouraging. Yeah. Well, I think that with that, I think we're just about, my thing is restarted too many times. So I don't know exactly how long we've been going, but it's been close to 2 hours. I know that.
Pretty close.
Yeah. So with that said, I can hear the kids, and I think fatherhood is calling me. Dinner time with the family. And so I think we'll call
my stomach's calling me.
Well, Rob's stomach is calling him. Yeah. And Will's so spiritual that he's fasting. So there we go.
I do from time to time do that.
It's a good thing. Today. It's a lost art form is what fasting is sometimes. So thanks so much, Will, for agreeing to come on and sharing. I know we could go for even longer. We'll have to have you back on. And because I'd love to get into the modern take. How did the world, like, you have all the guests talking about it, but let's hear Will's take on how the world got to where it is, and what are some of the things we can do to, on a personal way. Like I love, Jordan Peterson goes, make your bed, right? A very practical way of changing your own world. Yeah, and so that would be really good to have you back on to talk about some of the practical things that we can do in today's day and age. But thanks so much for sharing and being vulnerable and honest and transparent and all those things. And it was so refreshing. So, and thanks, Rob, Josh, for agreeing last second to come on and participate as Marie number 2. So you did
been fun.
You did an adequate job filling in. I'll let him know that we have a backup for him. So
thanks for setting a good platform.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. And
practice the coyote howl next time.
There we go. That's right. Yeah, I'll brief you a little bit more on that. That's right. So with that said, thanks everybody for tuning in, and our prayer for you is that what we were talking about really deeply touched you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You in the show description, you can find the websites. My website, you'll find Will's website. Rob has a website somewhere, but I don't know that it's even doing anything. So maybe I'll link to your Facebook.
No.
Yeah. And we'd love to be a help, and especially as Will goes forward with opening his counseling for men, and we'll make sure that we update the podcast description. So let me know when that's live, and going forward, I'll update the podcast description for that. And point people to that, and maybe we'll have you back to talk about that too. And
great.
So thanks, guys, and everybody. God bless, and it's been wonderful to be together.